Now once there was a man who was so short he only came up as high as most people's knees, and they would make fun of him and call him the knee-high man because he was only that tall. Well, he didn't like that name, and he didn't like being that short. And so he decided, I'm going to go out and learn how to get big. Well, he looked around for the biggest things he could find. He didn't want to ask any people because they were always making fun of him. But he looked and he found himself the biggest horse he could find. And he said, Mr. Horse, how did you get to be so big? Well, the horse thought about it for a minute and he said, well, I just eat hay and oats and whinny all the time and run around in the field. And the knee-high man thought, I've never tried doing that. I've never eaten hay and I've never eaten oats. I've never whinnied and I've never run around in a field. Maybe those are what you need to do to get big. And so he went home and started practicing those things. He would eat hay. He thought hay tasted terrible. He would eat oats. Well, they tasted a little better, but they weren't really that great for him. He tried whinnying. Well, that didn't seem to make him any bigger. He tried running around in the field. Made his legs feel stronger after a while, but when he measured, he wasn't half an inch taller. Oh, that didn't work, he said. I'd better ask somebody else. So he looked around, and he found a big old bull that belonged to a farmer down the road. And he said, Mr. Bull, how did you get to be so big? Well, the bull had to think about it for a minute because he'd pretty much always been big ever since he was little, and he didn't think that he remembered how to get to be big. And he said, all I remember is I ate a lot of grass and I bellowed and charged at anybody I didn't like. Okay, said the knee-high man. I'll go home and try those things. Well, he tried eating the grass from the front lawn. It tasted terrible. He ate as much grass as he could until his stomach started to hurt from that grass. And that gave him the expertise to bellow. Well, that felt good for his stomach, but didn't do much else, and he saw somebody he didn't like, and he bellowed and charged at him. Well, somebody seeing the knee-high man bellow and charge at him broke out laughing, and the knee-high man got so mad he began jumping up and down and laughing back and yelling, and it didn't really work, and he didn't get any taller. He tried again and again, and he just didn't get any taller no matter what he did. Finally, he said, I've been asking big folks how they got big. Maybe I should ask somebody smart. And he went looking and looking and looking, and he found a big old hoot owl sitting up in a tree. And he asked the owl, Mr. Owl, you're smart. I think you might be able to help me. I need to know how to get big. Who said you should be big? Well, no, I just need to get big because I need to be big. What would you do if you got to be bigger? Well, if I was big, nobody could beat me up in fights. And who is challenging you to fight? And the knee-high man thought and said, well, nobody, I guess. But if I was bigger, I could see farther away. I can barely see any distance at this height. And who said you couldn't see farther? If you need to see farther, climb up a tree like where I am. And the knee-high man climbed up the tree and sat next to the owl, and he looked, and he could see ever so far. It was amazing. And he looked down, and he saw that he was up higher than the tallest person he knew. And he thought, well, okay, so I don't need to fight, and I can see farther by climbing a tree. And the owl said, I think you need to learn how to make your brain bigger, not your body bigger. If you can figure out how to do things, you don't need to be taller at all. And the knee-high man thought about it and thought about it and thought, if I was big, I couldn't have sat on this branch. And if I was big, I'd have to do a lot more work just to feed myself. Maybe the owl's right. And so it was, the knee-high man went home and started learning things to make his brain bigger. Now, it wasn't like running around in a field, and it wasn't like bellowing and charging at people, because this worked. And even though he was still only knee-high, the knee-high man got near as smart as that owl. And so, that way, he lived pretty happy ever after. And that's the story of the knee-high man.